You're listening to Free-ish in Higher Ed. Welcome back to Free-ish in Higher Ed. I'm your host, Chelsea, and today my guest is someone who has dedicated her life to making college more accessible and equitable for students across the country. Dr. Sara Goldrick-Rab, thank you so much for being here. Can you start by introducing yourself and telling listeners a little about the work you're doing?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be on this very fresh new podcast. I'm Sara. I live in Philadelphia. Things to know about me besides my sort of like professional usual stuff. I'm a mom of two. I have a giant dog, 100-pound pit bull hound mix, and I have two cats, including one that's named after the Pell Grant, if you can believe it. And in my so-called free time, I box, and I'm also the chair of a nonprofit that is helping empower young people by helping them learn how to box as well as mentoring and such as a way to try to keep them away from gun violence in our city. So that's kind of a range of stuff. Why I do what I do. I was inspired at a very young age by my grandfather. Very, very lucky that my grandfather is still with us. My grandfather's turning 98 in November. And my grandfather was only able to go to college because of the GI Bill, because he served in the military and that made it possible for him to afford college. And he has made very, very clear throughout my life that college was a game changer for him and that only because of that policy was he able to afford it. And so as I developed through my education and, training in sociology, when I came to really understand how few people actually had the opportunity to go to college, and in particular to really be in college, meaning like to spend time learning and rather than just spending time working to pay for college, it really frustrated me. And so I think of this as trying to do for others what the government did for my grandfather.
I love that your work is centered around those experiences. And I know in my family, I'm the first to go to college. So I know the value of having access to an education, but not only having the access, but being able to obtain it. So.
Absolutely. It's one thing to get in the door, but when I started my career, we weren't talking much about who got to finish college, who actually left with something that was going to help them repay any debt that they had. And of course, over the last 25 years, that's become much more of a conversation. But that did not happen by accident. That took hard work to make that part of the conversation.
Right. And so I guess I wanted to hear kind of what has led you into this research that you've been doing and how you're centering it on student basic needs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I came to the basic needs issues through the lens of college affordability more broadly, meaning, when we were talking 25 years ago about why it was that some people didn't go to college, and in particular, why many people didn't graduate. If you asked people what the leading reasons were, they would tell you that it had to do with their high school academic preparation and whether or not their parents went to college. They would not really mention the cost of college. And that's because the widespread assumption was simply that financial aid was taking care of any gaps that students had. And I really began to question that evidence as I talked to regular people who were still finding it hard to pay for college. And I knew that both from just having gone to college and knowing people, and I knew that from studies that I was doing early on as a graduate student. And then when I became a faculty member and began really leading my own studies, I saw this coming up all the time. I saw students saying, no, I can't pay my bills. And I launched a big study looking at the effects of a private scholarship program, trying to figure out, would giving students more money make things work, right? Would stuff go better? And it was in the context of asking questions of students in those studies, like that particular big study, that I started to hear about students not having enough to eat. And I started to hear about a student moving into a homeless shelter. And when I went back to my desk and I Googled, what's the data look like on those things? There weren't data. I couldn't find numbers. And what I came to understand was that this was pretty much an ignored or overlooked topic. And, as I'm trained to do as a researcher, my goal became fill that gap, and particularly fill that gap because this is a very real thing happening to students and we're not recognizing it. So, Rashida Crutchfield said at a conference that I led many years ago, she said that researchers discovered basic needs and security the way that Columbus discovered America. Wow. Meaning it was there. It's not like we invented the topic. It's not like we created the issue. There were people who thought we were doing it for political reasons, that we just wanted more money for higher ed, so we created problems that didn't exist. That's nonsense. What we did, it's not like we landed on other people the way Columbus did. That ugly part of that is not what she's saying. But the fact is, there were homeless college students. There were students, who were going to school who could barely afford to be there because they couldn't afford gas. This was already true. We just didn't have statistics about it. And we also didn't have policymaker attention to it. And I really saw an opportunity to help. I really thought this is where me being a researcher could actually be very powerful. And I have an obligation by virtue of the fact that I'm not a first generation student, that I have already had all these privileges of a college education supported by government and family. This is where I can make a difference. And I have never really looked back because I think it has been one of those areas where science can really help and where we can discover new ways of doing things that real people can actually, integrate it into their work.
And I wanted to ask an obvious question, but what has your data shown as it relates to students who receive support with food or housing vouchers?
Mm-hmm. So what we find out is utterly unsurprising. When we give people the help that they need, they do far better. I'm a sociologist, and my grandmother, when I first told her that I was going to be a sociology major, she said, yes, sociology, the statement of the obvious. I really, really love that. My grandmother was a brilliant woman. She was a writer. I'm constantly just trying to feel like, how do I live up to who my grandmother was? And that meant a lot to me when she said that, because first I was worried she was criticizing it. But I have to say that I now understand how important it is that we say and defend and spell out obvious things. And so, it is frustrating that if I'm going to convince a college president to put money into feeding students, for example, by giving them vouchers so they can eat in the cafeteria, that I actually need to prove to them that that will do things like raise graduation rates. But there are those college presidents and there are those policymakers. And so I've done those studies. And, what's very clear is that we can't food pantry our way out of this, that pantries are nice, but pantries are really, I'd like to think of it kind of as marketing. Pantries are a signal to students that somebody gets it, but they are not the tool that we need to actually help students really succeed, because that requires doing more than just emergency food. That requires making sure that students can afford to eat healthy meals on a regular basis. And that involves things like making sure that they can afford to eat in the cafeteria, making sure that they can afford to go to the grocery store, and that they can buy food with dignity, right? They have choices. Same thing's true with housing. Obviously, shelters are not the solution to the housing crisis. Affordable housing is the solution to the housing crisis. Right. And we know that, right? And so imagine if we were witnessing, like we've witnessed over the last 10 years with food pantries, imagine if we were witnessing the proliferation of homeless shelters on campuses all over the country. I think that we would agree that that was odd, that was the main thing we were doing. I don't think we would do that. UCLA has a homeless shelter. It's called the Bruin Shelter. It opened a decade ago. It wasn't opened by the college. It was a university. It was opened by students. But that didn't become a big trend. And I'm glad. Because again, that's not the solution. So the science is helping us figure out those kinds of conclusions, like helping us figure out what to do and what not to do, and where we need to do more right? To maximize, for example, not just how students do in school, but whether their children are okay, right? Whether their health improves, and all the other sorts of things that lead to a good life.
Yeah, and as a student with lived experience and as an advocate, I definitely feel very seen by your work and your research because oftentimes navigating through school, being a parent, being first gen, there's all these different barriers and obstacles that come up. But then if you have an emergency or a crisis, it's like oftentimes students don't know where to turn or who to ask for help. And I feel like the work that you're doing really highlights that this is a real issue because sometimes when you're looking for help, it's almost like you have to prove your poverty or prove your need. And then there may not even be any help for you once you've done that. So
That's
that brings,
exactly right. It's exactly right. And just so we're really clear with each other, the reason you feel seen by it is because I learned it from students like you. So what's happening here is a cycle of listening. I do a lot of listening, and I did this especially through my research, lots of listening to lots of people. And then going back and analytically thinking through where are there consistencies and differences in what people are saying to me, right? And then trying to triangulate that and say, is it just one person who feels like she has to perform her poverty in order to get emergency aid? No, it's pretty much every student who's been in that situation. Okay, maybe this is a problem, right? And then beginning to speak about it and beginning to talk to problem solvers about what the solutions could be. So I think that a lot more folks would feel seen more often if more people would understand that their job is to listen and then to also give voice to that set of issues, right? I don't have to have walked in your shoes to have both empathy and a sense of righteous indignation in your shared fight, if that makes sense.
yes. And that really highlights the scale of the issues that we're talking about. And I wanted to ask kind of beyond the food pantry or hiring a basic needs coordinator, what does it really look like for a college to support students in a sustainable way based on the research and the work that you're doing?
You should be able to feel it in everything the college does. So if a college is really centering students as humans first, then, for example, when they send you material, if they do, or on their website, you see people. You see people who look like you. You see language. You read things that sound relevant to you. So, for example, if the website doesn't talk about how you're going to pay for college in any significant way other than the FAFSA, it's not reflecting what's really happening to most people, right? One of the most common struggles in college is rent. If that issue is not spoken about when the college talks about its work, then it's missing. When you come onto campus, when you go to class, do the faculty treat you like you're a human being? Do they, for example, lay out a schedule of, activities and readings and such that make you feel like this is something that will help you grow and that is communicated in a way that is respectful of yourself as an adult? Or do they have an attendance policy that ignores that the buses don't always run on time and childcare can fall short? Is there any flexibility offered? Is there any openness to meet with you? And so on. And then when it comes to support services, again, do they speak about the things that happen outside the classroom that affect what happens in the classroom? Are there things beyond academic advising? Do they simply pay lip service and talk about, we know there's food insecurity and you can go across town to this resource over here for help? Or do they bring those people onto the campus so that in between your classes you can meet with them and get support? I see colleges increasingly doing this whole range of things, and the reason that they do it tends to be that there is at least some level of top leadership that has taken the time to do this work, to internalize it. It doesn't always have to be the president. Could be some board members working with the VP of Student Services, for example. Or maybe the president doesn't get it, but there are a bunch of next level administrators who do. Austin Community College is increasingly becoming a place that is doing this work under the leadership of Russell Lowry Hart, who did it previously at Amarillo College. We're getting to learn from that because he's doing it for a big institution. It's really a lot easier to do this in a small institution where it's possible for everybody to know your name. In a big place, conveying care across a district, that's a whole other ballgame. It's also different to do it at a place like Compton College, which has very few resources, relatively speaking, in terms of dollars, compared to a big flagship university, where there are fewer students with need and far more resources per student to go around. So, I would honestly say that anybody who tells you that they have a playbook for this, who can tell you step by step what they think you should do, is probably overselling where we are right now. But where we are is that there are a set of practices that do appear to generally be achieving good results. Your mileage can vary based on context. Not everything will work everywhere. But the key is to lead with care, empathy, love, respect, dignity, and all of the related things that all human beings need and deserve.
In Texas, House Bill 8 shifted the funding model for community colleges from enrollment-based to completion rates. So now there's financial incentives for these colleges to figure out what students need in order to actually complete their degrees. And that's really why I think some of the work that Austin Community College is doing, especially with their brand new Care Network Center, is so great, because it sets such a strong example for other institutions on what it looks like to have student-centered policy and then actually put that into action. So.
I agree. I will say one thing, though. I don't think that the state of Texas shifted the funding because they wanted services to care more about students. I actually think they shifted the funding, number one, because they thought that they would actually end up spending less money, not spending more, okay? Because they only have to fund the colleges if they achieve these outcomes. The colleges wanted more money and needed more money. They were receiving far too little money, and they saw this as a strategy to be able to possibly get more money, right? So in other words, no money was coming, and a completion-based strategy is a way with the Republican government to be able to try to get more. But the jury is really out, I will just caution you, on whether, in fact, completion-based funding is actually leading to students being centered as humans, whether it's leading to more completion, whether it's lowering costs for students, and certainly whether it's doing that thing that nobody, in the federal level wants us to talk about, which is doing equitable work. Mm-hmm. That said, I hear you, because we all want colleges to get students to graduation, right? And so it's a complex thing. I think that Republicans have actually taken it and used it a little bit, very strategically.
Well, and I tend to see things through rosy colored glasses, or,
understandably.
But I never really thought about it that way because I was too close to it. And I've struggled with this idea that my school doesn't really care about me.
By the way, they do, though. They do care. I want to be clear. They just do. It's not that they don't care. It's that what the government did really has little to do with it, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. You should want your school to care about you, and you should be looking for reminders of it, and they should be reminding you.
I think that's why what Austin Community College is doing is so great, because it just shows that they do care, and they're making every attempt that they can, it appears, to center students and also create an environment where they can thrive if they tap into those resources. So
yeah, I think you nailed it, Chelsea.
Thank you. So I wanted to actually pivot into real college curriculum, which is something I'm so excited about. We've had several of the real college curriculum students and former students here on the podcast. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of tell listeners a little about that work and how it's changing the way that higher education institutions support their students.
Yeah. Well, the curriculum is a master class that is intended to support faculty and staff who want to learn how to do the kinds of things that I was talking about earlier. Now, I don't mean, faculty who want to learn how to do SNAP applications, because that's not really the role of faculty, but faculty who do want to feel equipped to actively support today's students in large and small ways. We have to admit that for many of today's faculty and staff, even the ones who are, in their 30s and 40s, the training that we got did not include basic needs as a topic. So we came out of professional backgrounds and were hired into our jobs and started moving through, the career ladder without that preparation. And it's unfair. It is unfair to ask people to do jobs that they have not been supported to do. And when you look out there for professional development opportunities in this space, there really aren't very many. I was really honored to lead what was called the Real College Conference for many years, starting in 2015, 2016, 2017, and so on. And these were very popular national events. We were always oversubscribed in terms of, attendance. People wanted to be there. It was a struggle to be able to afford to put these on. But we heard over and over was these were invaluable spaces for people to get what they were looking for, meaning to be in conversation with others who could help them strategize how to reach students more effectively, what language to use, what support services to demand, what to advocate for in terms of public policy, and so on. And so when the pandemic hit and the conference was put on hiatus, and then the subsequent financial changes have happened that have made it hard to launch conferences every year, I decided to partner with the person who taught me how to teach, Jessie Stommel. And together we pivoted that material, that professional development material, into an online masterclass that anybody could access, even the busiest people. So, we should think of faculty and staff as people who rarely have 2 hours to sit down to go through a training module, but might have 10 or 15 minutes at a time to work through something over the course of a month. And so that's exactly what the curriculum is. It's an asynchronous opportunity to be able to watch something, read something, think about, or maybe do a little writing about something, and therefore learn something. Bite-sized content. And there are 3 courses that make up Basic Needs 101. The first one is really a grounding in who today's students are, what I call real college students, the people who are actually the majority in higher ed, and who I think keep it very real in the way that they have to juggle life while they're going to school. Then there's a discussion and a course about what I call the new economics of college, which really forms the basis for understanding the root causes of basic needs insecurity. It's not right to teach people to do something without explaining why it's necessary and without helping them really see the bigger picture. My main goal in that course is to help people understand that if a student is food insecure, that is not a private problem of a personal individual. That's a structural failure. And that they need to see that as a structural failure in order to actually empower students and help them succeed. And then the last part of that sequence is a course about the culture of caring and about ways to advance caring on campus. There's also like what you might call an elective, an add-on course that is specific about supporting the basic needs of parenting students. And we're really proud of that course because it, I think, aligns really well with the considerable national interest in really maximizing the impact of higher education by investing in parents and their children. Or frankly, I should say caregivers and their children. The Real College curriculum is different in many ways from other professional development opportunities. First and foremost, it's super cheap. A college could purchase a license to give it to everyone on the campus for less than the cost that it takes sometimes to send an individual to a conference. Mm-hmm. Okay. This is, it's not free. The reason it's not free is because we got to be able to maintain the technology underneath it, and we need to be able to afford to create more courses and update the existing content. Secondly, students are actually centered as teachers. So we don't frame students in the curriculum as sad stories or examples to be made, right? We frame them as the people we should be listening to learn how to do well and how to do better. And the primary people who are speaking as experts in the curriculum are not researchers. They're the people who actually do the work on the college campuses. So, everyone from basic needs staff on the ground at UC Berkeley, to the college president of Compton College, to, students from multiple cities who have done things like traverse college while homeless or while parenting, are all positioned as experts. And I think that range of things is why I'm so proud of this curriculum. It is something that took years to develop. Multiple foundations contributed support, and I had to really fight to be able to ensure that it was an independent entity, meaning that it could be out in the world without any particular institution having ownership over it or profiting from it. So it is now with a not-for-profit called Believe in Students, and they are the ones who are making that opportunity available to colleges and universities, and also to nonprofits that work with college students all over the country.
Yes, and I have a philosophy that you are an expert in your lived experiences, and I know you've said that you cannot teach lived experience. So I love that you position the students and the people that are on the ground doing the work as experts, because I share in the significance of that when it comes to this type of work.
I see a lot of lip service paid to it, Chelsea. I see people put students on stages with no preparation and no real respect for what that's going to take. And, one of the things that I really got out of the hard work of putting on conferences was really leaning into what it meant to bring people with lived experience into the space as legitimate participants along with everybody else. And that was one of the most expensive things I've ever done, because it meant, for example, if the faculty or the staff were going to fly in from other cities, then why would we only have local students, right? Why not actually pay to fund students to travel from other parts of the country and have hotels paid for, not putting them up in cheap accommodations, right? There like everyone else. And if they were going to be on a stage, they got the same support to prepare that any other keynote would get. And I learned from that. And I also have to say that I have learned a ton from my own community college students, in that I am taught by them every time I'm in the classroom. I wish everyone could understand how amazing it is to be in the community college classroom, because every single time that you walk in the door, you're going to learn something that you didn't already know. And it's a joy. And I wish that we understood that students were just as powerful teachers as the person in the front of the room labeled professor.
I love how open you are. You're like a celebrity to me. I really just admire the work you're doing and the way you're open to learning from your students. I feel like that's kind of rare. A lot of professors aren't willing or open to learn from students, but when you do, you gain a wealth of knowledge about their experiences. And I feel like that perspective is what makes your work so impactful.
I think actually there are a lot of faculty that subscribe to what we call a sage on the stage model, which is kind of like celebrity, right? That they're the ones who are performing and you're the audience. And that's how learning is supposed to happen. And we know it doesn't work. And, I'm always honored by the respect like that you just showed me around, feeling like it's a celebrity. And I think mainly it's because I've been on television and things like that, right?
Yeah.
But I will also say that openly that I have a lot of discomfort with it. And that's because that's not natural to my being. And I think partly because as somebody who's really tried to lean hard into being an authentic teacher, I want to connect way more than I see celebrities doing. Although I will fully admit, I'm a Swiftie. And the reason I'm a Swiftie is because I do think that Taylor does authenticity. I don't think it's performative authenticity for her. I think that's who she is. She couldn't do it any other way if she wanted to. And if there was a mechanism for her to actually, for example, hear her fans singing, right? If there was a way for her to hear back without the nonsense, like I understand why she doesn't want to watch TikTok, right? There's too much nonsense thrown at her, too much critique, so on. But if there were a way for her to get feedback the way that I get it from students, to get two-way street, I bet she would do it too. It was important to me that I never profit. I don't want to profit in any way, shape, or form from the research that I've done. I very deeply just want it to matter.
Well, I will tell you, it does matter, and I feel so seen by the work that you're doing, and I can really resonate with the discomfort that you feel because I want to do the work. I want to be an advocate. I want to use my lived experiences to lift up awareness for student basic needs. That's why I'm doing this whole passion project. I care so much, but the level of discomfort that comes along with being put on a stage or
Mm-hmm.
being recorded. I still don't really like to be on camera because I just want to kind of stay in my little bubble, but I also want to have an impact. So I really empathize with your discomfort around the celebrity statement, but the work that you're doing is so meaningful. I'm just really honored that I've been able to get to know you. And you're the most accessible quote unquote celebrity that I know because I've been able to connect with you and talk to
Yeah.
you. And
Yeah.
I remember when we were discussing doing this episode, you're like, I'm just a regular person, like, because
Yep.
I was kind of freaking out. It's a big deal, but I appreciate you being
I'm
so,
very much a regular person.
yeah,
And I think that I've had to be very intentional about figuring out how to be accessible. Being
right.
accessible takes planning.
Mm,
It does. It takes setting aside the time so that you're not overscheduled, so that you can actually be accessible, and reserving some energy so that you're replenished, so that you can actually show up and be in the present moment. I'll be honest with you, if I was doing this with you 5 years ago, my head would be somewhere else right now. I
mm,
would have to be thinking about what my team was doing or what a funder was doing while I was multitasking. And I'm not anymore. And I think it's a huge part of growth is really thinking about just crafting a life. And this is what we all want, right? A life where we have the autonomy to make those decisions, including, by the way, the autonomy over what happens with our bodies. And
mm,
I want to note that because everything that you just said about, being on the stage and all of that, the irony is that in order to do some of this work as a woman, in particular, especially a woman in academia, there's such a stigma attached to us. And so I have had to do things like change the style of my hair, wear makeup, things I didn't do early in my career, simply because I received feedback that if I wanted my message to translate on television, that was required. And I
mm.
can't tell you enough how uncomfortable it makes me to even consider putting another book out because what it would take to get back on those stages is a regime and a set of expenses. How odd is it to think that I have to drop $400 to get hair and makeup done to go on a stage and talk about homelessness?
Right.
And somebody could say you don't have to. Oh, that's nonsense. If you think I don't have to, then you should see the difference in the responses that I get. When I do those things, I look approachable and kinder and younger and sexier. And what a bunch of nonsense. I would so much rather give that $400 to a homeless person.
Right. Right.
Like, right? It's just an endless series of challenging choices. And I'm sure I've made some of them wrong, but I also think we should talk about that part of the work.
As a student with lived experience, there were times where I was like, I want to do this, but I don't have $250 to get my hair done. And now as an advocate, what
Yes.
about my image? What are we putting out there? As someone that has basic needs insecurities, the goal is not to look like my circumstance. I don't want you to look at me and know what I'm going through because I want to be able to navigate and function and feel comfortable and confident in these spaces, but at what cost, like you said.
What a challenging thing you just raised, because imagine you're absolutely right. And imagine the organizer that reaches out to offer you hair and makeup. Can you imagine how concerned they would be about how you would take that? Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
So there has to be a way to open the door to ask what you need and empower you to say what it is you need.
right.
And I guess to me, the standard should be whatever you're offering the other folks who are going to be on that stage. Although, to be honest, they might be able to afford their own,
I was
right?
gonna say, yeah.
Their own wardrobe, right? And that's still not enough. So yeah, it is such a major challenge. And I agree that it is. I can't tell you how many times I've had students call me and say they're going to put me on this stage and I don't have something to wear. And can I get some money for that? And of course, but my goodness, it's hard. Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
My heart is just so with you on that. I've seen it so many times and it's so challenging.
Yeah, yeah, it is quite challenging, but really quickly, I did want to say I appreciate your vulnerability and being so open and sharing the hidden costs of this work. For students listening who might be struggling, maybe they skipped a meal this week or they're behind on rent and maybe they're ashamed to ask for help, what would you say to them?
The first thing that I would say is what I say to every student who comes and tells me a story about, a financial hardship like that, which is that you're not alone and it's not your fault. Those are the two most powerful things I think anybody can really say. I think sometimes we think what we're supposed to do is just say, I'm sorry, or hug them. I don't think either of those things is actually all that helpful. I think it's essential that we help folks know, again, that this is a structural failure. And therefore, they're caught in a system that is undermining their success. And the minute that they can see that that's what's happening, they can then become focused on changing that system. Now, I'm not saying that the person who doesn't know where they're going to sleep tonight is suddenly going to become an advocate to fight for affordable housing while they're trying to get housing. I'm not saying that. But they do need to know, for example, that when that person at the district just told them no, right, we don't have a space for you, that it's not a matter of them not having asked correctly. It's not that they didn't look right. It's not that they're not worthy. It's that, number one, there's a real shortage of housing. Two, the people who have to say no to them are in pain too. Overwhelmingly, the people on the front line, those caseworkers, all of those people are human beings who have been asked by a horrendous government in many places to be the ones who have to deliver the bad news. So it's bad on both sides. And yet we set them up to fight, right? Like it's a classic mistake. So, that's a huge part. And then making sure they really do know that they're not alone, that there are other students in the situation, that there are people who are aware that this is happening, and therefore that they are not wrong to voice what they need to voice and to continue to seek help. And that unfortunately, it is the case in this society that only the people who ask for help get help. And that then I tend to go one step further and point out that wealthy people don't ask for help. They simply demand it and or take it. And that I need them to act that way. I need them to take it like they deserve it. I need them to persist in asking for it without reservation and without shame. And that when they get down, because they will get down, that they recognize it's normal to get down. It's totally unacceptable. It's completely human to get down. But that they also have to know that they're the only ones who have the ability to change this whole problem by getting back up and pushing forward. And that we all win when they become college graduates and, become advocates and become parents who, can do this for their own kids, right? And so on. And so that's what I wish there were more of us telling students. And it's how I wish we were talking about students. It makes me sad for people who think that the students enduring things like homelessness are the not great students, instead of recognizing that these are some of the most amazing people who are clearly very interested in learning, or they wouldn't be in your classroom, because it's way easier, honestly, to be homeless not in college than it is to be homeless in college, right?
Yes.
It's why I want to change hiring systems that made it so hard for me when working at a university to hire people who were going through real things or who had come through different pathways to get there. Hiring people who have endured traumas. These are some of the most, not just resilient people, but these are the people who get what the work is. And these are the people who don't create drama over minor things because they know what real drama looks like. These are the people I enjoy working with, frankly, the most. And yet, we do the opposite. So, yeah, that's a set of things.
Well, Dr. Goldrick-Rab, I just want to thank you not only for your time, but for lending your voice to my passion project, Creation Higher Ed. This has been such an amazing honor to have you Lastly, how can people follow your work or connect with you online?
Yeah. So if you just Google my name, if you just start typing Sara Gold R for Goldrick-Rab, my website should come up right away. And I give you lots of opportunities there to connect with me. I'm on social media. LinkedIn and Instagram are particularly good ways. And then my email is on there. I really, really, really enjoy being out in the world, meaning like I love visiting campuses and communities. If folks think that it would be helpful, that I can be useful on a college campus somewhere, feel free to write me and invite me. I do this all the time. And I really, I like all kinds of different partnerships. I'm very much in a stage of my career where I want to try new things. I'll put out the call that I'm especially interested in trying things in the K-12 space because I think that I have done so much in the higher ed space to affect these challenges that I'd love to get to people when they're a little younger. And I'm also interested in the workforce space in a way that I wasn't in the past. So, employees who are trying to be in college, I'd love to work more on the employer side. So, you never know who's out there, and I always think I should float my wishes just in case someone catches one.
Yeah, and what a great open invitation. So for listeners, I will be sure to include Dr. Goldrick-Rab's website as well as her LinkedIn in the episode description. And I want to thank you all for tuning in. I hope today's conversation sparks a deeper understanding that students are human first and that education can only thrive when their basic needs are met. Until next time. If something in this episode moved you or resonated with you, don't be afraid to use your voice or step into your purpose. And if you want to be part of this conversation or have a story to tell, I want to hear it. You can email me at free.ishpodcast@gmail.com. That's free.ish podcast@gmail.com. You can also DM me on Instagram at free.ishpodcast. We're free-ish, and we're claiming our space unapologetically.